Hi all. Today I'm going to be addressing, giving my thoughts and opinion on our new MP Tom Hunt's article in the East Anglian Daily Times slash Ipswich Star. Um, the article, I will put a link either up there or down there too, so that you can have a read for yourself and have an opinion on that, just like I have an opinion on it. When I read it, I thought, crikey, he's gone there. His article is basically we need to start having a conversation with regards to cultural differences and how that is impacting the feeling in Ipswich and the perception on the door when canvassing that there are certain communities in Ipswich who are committing certain crimes, and the feeling that this isn't going to be looked at because of political correctness, and that it needs to be addressed. And if someone commits a crime or if someone does something that makes the community as a whole feel uncomfortable, then regardless of your culture, it needs to be dealt with. So that's the gist of what I got from the article and the follow-up radio interview that was done on the Mark Murphy show, which I will also try and link if I remember. So it is, yes, a conversation that needs to be had. It is a conversation that not many people want to have. And the reason people don't want to have that conversation is because nobody wants to be labelled as a racist. And predictably, after I read the article, I knew that that's what was going to happen, is that Tom was going to be called a racist, and the usual suspects within the Labour Party immediately did call him a racist. Tom needs to be able to, just like anyone else, make an observation and address that. The difficulty I personally had with the article is that it didn't have any data to back up his claims. Now, given that I have campaigned for two local elections, I have spoken to people on the door in Ipswich, I have had the same experience as Tom when it comes to the feedback of the perception of crime in Ipswich being predominantly from certain cultures, certain crimes, not all crime, but certain crimes come up time and time again, and there is the perception that it is from specific cultures, specific groups of people. So in that aspect, what he has said does reflect my personal experience. I do, however, understand why there has been an outrage with regards to not having data and information to back it up, because that's exactly how I felt when I read it. I'm still in support of his decision to have this conversation, probably because of the immediate outrage that happened afterwards. We cannot take the subject of race and culture off the table when it comes to looking at why people commit crimes and addressing these reasons, because it's an uncomfortable situation. When I studied, just at A-level, but when I studied psychology and we looked at criminology, we looked at studies revolving around the different types of crimes that women commit in comparison to men. When women commit murder, the different characteristics and the different methods that are involved in comparison to men. We also looked at the different types of crime when it comes to your appearance. If you are good looking, you are more likely to commit a white collar crime, according to these studies. We also investigated economic backgrounds, what type of crime you're more likely to commit if you're of an affluent background in comparison to if you're of a poorer background. So we look at this, and in criminology you look at all aspects of this. These things aren't off the table. You will often hear people on the TV, presenters on the TV, on the Right Stuff or whatever it's called now, and all this other stuff, talking about how men are more likely to commit violent sexual assaults in comparison to women. You will hear all these other comparisons, but if someone was to bring race into it or culture into it, then it is off the table and it's shut down completely. This is an uncomfortable conversation that we have to have, but there are specific crimes that are committed by certain communities, such as FGM. This is a crime where young women have their female area mutilated, absolutely butchered in the name of that culture. That happens in England. That happens in Suffolk. Might not necessarily the act itself happen in Suffolk, but these girls living in this area may be taken to another country to have that done or performed, or a relative comes from that country into this country and commits that horrendous crime. That is an example of a crime that happens that isn't part of our general culture in Britain. There are probably other things that happen. It cannot be completely off the table for the sake of political correctness. Do I think it needs to be conducted sensitively? Absolutely. I also think that Tom has kicked the hornet's nest, and he's done it in quite a bullish way, and it wouldn't be the method that I would have used in order to have the conversation. But I respect him for going in that way at the same time, strangely, because we're now having that conversation. And he does have a duty to the people he spoke to on the door. He has a duty to the general population in Ipswich, representing them. He does still, however, have a duty to those minority groups, and if this isn't done correctly and sensitively, could be subjected to a rise in hate crime. And we've also seen a rise in those kind of crimes in Ipswich and Suffolk recently. So it needs to be dealt with very sensitively, but the conversation still has to be had. And I'm hoping that the conversation is going to be had in an honest way. The data needs to be released. People need to know what the truth is. And it can either completely debunk the claims, because the perception of crime is often different to the actual crime. We could go to the door, and when we're told X community is doing X, it's always these people that are doing it. We could say, well, actually, we've looked into the data. That's incorrect. We're sorry that you've had this experience, but it isn't actually the big picture here. Or we can say, we've looked at the data and actually your perception is correct, and we have done specific outreach training in those specific cultures or communities, and we are addressing this to reduce the crime. It is a conversation that has to be had. How it's going to be had is something that I'm a bit apprehensive about. But they're my thoughts on the article, and I would like to think that I've had quite a balanced opinion on this, that I'm not being partisan and following him 100%, but also being supportive because it's a conversation that had to be had. I just hope now that we don't all go into our little corners and start fighting about it. I hope Labour in particular doesn't continue this narrative of trying to censor people and stop people having the conversation, and I hope that we can all work together, especially the community groups and the councillors and and the police and everyone just thrash this out and address the real problems in Ipswich. Because as a resident of Ipswich and a mother who's raising 2 young children in this town, I just want to feel safe. And if this helps with the overall picture, then let's have this conversation. So they're my thoughts. Thank you as ever for watching, and I will speak to you again soon.